Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to TGIK this week. I am your host, Kris Nova, streaming live from the Heptio studios here in Seattle, Washington. We're running on Linux today, so the first thing we want to do before we get into everybody's favorite part of the episode, which is hellos, is we want to make sure that we're good on a sanity check for all systems in place. And I want to talk about the chat here in the screen and how it's going to be a little bit different this time. So hi everybody, looks like we got some folks in chat. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I'm scrolling all the way up. Okay, we got, hi Vanit, hi George, good to see you. Hey Sean, hey Bob, Nadeem, Marco, always good to see you. Sebastian, hi. Anne's here, hey Anne, how's it going? Suresh, Lamati, another one of our regulars. Leonardo, Joe, Eric, and it looks like we have people joining from North Carolina, from Havana, although I think last time somebody said they were from Cuba, and they actually weren't from Cuba. We got somebody coming in from London, so thanks for joining if this is your weekend. Hey, Paul. Hey, Jem. Hi, Mitch from Sydney, and hi, Steven. How's it going? There's a huge turnout today. Looks like folks are excited to learn about Kata Containers. Lamati wants to know when I'm hiking Mount Everest. The answer is never, and if you want to know why, I'll tell you why offline. Strong opinions there, though. Hi from India, good to see you. Hi there from Tanzania, Scotland, Hamburg. Hi Chris from New Zealand here. Okay, definitely we'll be climbing in New Zealand sometime, so you should ping me offline as well. Hi from Bangalore. Okay, I gotta move forward because there's just a lot of people saying hi right now. So we're running on my Arch Linux computer today. So I looked at Kata Containers, and one of the first things I noticed was that it only runs on Linux. And I tried to run it on Darwin, and I got into some trouble along the way. And I think right now they support like a couple of the more popular flavors of Linux, like Ubuntu and Cent and some other ones. So of course, naturally, I'm going to try to run this thing on Arch. So I dragged in my huge Linux tower into the office, into the TGIK studio. I set it up, I hooked everything up, recompiled a bunch of stuff today to try to get everything working. And one of the things that we actually couldn't get working was the YouTube chat, which is pretty good if you think about it, considering all that's happening right now on Linux. Everything from audio drivers and video drivers and doing screen matching and dealing with X server and doing all this on Arch and kind of getting this all up and running. I think we're in a pretty good shape for today. So anyway, wanted to show folks, we're going to have HTOP over here on the right so we can see what's going on with my cores behind the scene. This is going to be a pretty in-depth episode. Hopefully by the end of the episode, we're actually going to be compiling a Linux kernel and running Kata containers with Docker on top of it. But we'll see how it goes. And to start off, we're going to do one of my favorite parts of the episode, which is talk about all the exciting things that happened in Kubernetes this week. So we've got our handy-dandy TGIK repo that we created a while ago. We're almost up to 100 stars, so thank you, everyone, for your support. We love it. Yeah, totally rocking 16 cores, and they're hyper-threaded cores as well, so I actually can do 32 concurrent system processes at one time, running on the Intel i7, which I figured would be appropriate since we're looking at what used to be called Intel Clear Containers and is now called Kata Containers. So a lot of Intel-y goodness happening today. So anyway, we've got our episode 38. We put the image in the repository every week, so if folks want to use the image for anything, feel free to. And we also have this README file here, which has links for the episode. And then if anybody wants to open up any pull requests throughout the episode to share other links or to share information or just to share notes, that would be handy for folks watching the episode on YouTube afterwards. Please feel free to open up PRs. They usually get merged pretty quickly. And yeah, let's just take a look at it. So the first section we have here is we have this miscellaneous section that George just added. Paul has a question here. Topic that folks, including myself, might be interested in. Kata containers versus gvisor, pros and cons for what's the best scenario. Paul, I think that's a really great question. I think maybe we could do a gvisor TGIK, and then after we do the Kata containers, we can kind of look at the differences and form an opinion and talk about why and when you would want to use each one and what each one is kind of offering. So anyway, George here on our Chrome screen here, George added some really great documentation. We have the Kata containers overview here. Excuse me. which this happened up in Vancouver just the other day. It's a YouTube video. Come check this thing out, and it's going to kind of explain like a more in-depth, more professional, put-together explanation of Kata containers and why they exist in the first place. And I'll try to do my best to give you folks a rundown today when we really jump into Kata there. The summit was great. I went up and I gave a talk on Kubicorn up in Vancouver. I'd never been to Vancouver before. It was a gorgeous city. It was great to be up there. Hey, Craig. Good to see you. Justin, did you just get the 100th TGIK star? You get a shout out live, TGIK. Thanks, Justin. Congratulations. And also, Justin, are you my co-author, Justin, or are you just a wild Justin in the wild? Okay, so next in line we have Kata Containers, which is another session here from Vancouver. Come in, check it out if you're interested in learning more. It's really cool that they had all these up and running on YouTube already. I feel like the conference was just the other day, so a pretty quick turnaround there from the OpenStack Summit. And then we have the Kata Containers project update. This is kind of what's going on with Kata, what's next, another session from the summit as well. And last but not least, we have Clear Linux has Kata Containers out of the box, the Containers Basic Bundle. So right before I went on the air, George pinged me and was like, hey, by the way, if you get a copy of Clear Linux up and running, it ships with Kata Containers out of the box. And then you can easily run Kata Container, or the Kata Runtime rather, with Docker, and you can actually run a Docker image using Kata for the container runtime. And we're going to look at what that means later, and then hopefully get a kernel compiled. I almost said comperneled. Get a kernel compiled so that we can run Kata here on Arch Linux, which will be exciting. So let's look at some of the links from the week outside of the Kata ecosystem. So the first one I wanted to bring up, Justin says I'm not sure I'm wild, but not anything. Okay. So the first one I wanted to bring up here is the operator metering. So I think it wasn't last week, but the week before, I did an episode on the operator framework, and then even talked about it again in Iceland, and live coded a Puffin operator on stage for folks to see kind of how Kubernetes worked, and we made it Puffin themed because we were in Iceland. So anyway, the operator metering is pretty cool. It's like an extension to the operator framework, and it helps you gain knowledge about the usage and cost to run Kubernetes native applications or operators. So it gives you like some meta information about these operators that you're running with the operator framework. So pretty exciting stuff. They're continuing to build out more things in the operator framework ecosystem from CoreOS, now part of Red Hat, and excited to see where that's going to go. Also, I think here in issues, we had somebody bring up, there was another one, where is it at? Operator Lifecycle Manager. So this is sort of an extension to the operator framework we talked about last time, which was the first episode really only covered the SDK. Let's cover the additional components such as the Lifecycle Manager. So this is a huge part of operators that we didn't even really touch on last time, which was how do you version and how do you upgrade your operators over time? And this Lifecycle Manager aims to help you solve those problems and gives you tooling on growing and maturing your operators and scaling things like the API and the codebase itself. So maybe we can do another TGIK on that in the future as well. So thanks for the issue there. So let's go back. So next up, for those of you who haven't heard, Microsoft totally bought GitHub. I'm not going to go into any of the definition of like what that means or what my opinions are, but it's just exciting to see that the open source space is changing so much. And it's like every day you get online and it's like you never know what you're going to see. This totally came out of left field. I think I was in Iceland and it was like the middle of the night and somebody was like, oh, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but Microsoft just bought GitHub. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And then like went to github.com and sure enough, Microsoft bought GitHub. So anyway, if you're interested in learning more, there's a really great article here. You can come in, you can read about it, and excited for our friends at Microsoft and excited for our friends at GitHub and excited to see what comes next for both parties. So this one was really super exciting, especially for me as one of the organizers of Kubernetes SIG AWS, which was Amazon finally announced EKS. And just to kind of give folks like a quick teaser here, well, I guess I shouldn't say they announced it. They finally released it, so it's GA now. They announced it at reInvent, which was, I think, last November, maybe last December. It was like the end of last year sometime. But if you come into like any old Amazon control panel here, you have a EKS button, and it's pretty cool because you just come here and like, bam, you have like create cluster button, and it's like, whoa, where did this come from? But like, you can totally just create a Kubernetes cluster in an EKS right now. I was talking to Bob, one of my co-chairs with SIG AWS, and we're thinking that maybe we can do a full TGIK on EKS and what it's actually doing behind the scenes and how that compares to tools like COPS that I've worked on and tools like Kubicorn that I started, and looking and seeing how things are the same and how things are different, and doing a full episode on EKS moving forward. So that's really exciting. And there's a couple of good blogs here that we asked folks at Amazon. So I think we have this one, which is sort of like talking about the community and the work they plan on doing in upstream moving forward. And then we also have just like the general announcement. This is kind of what we just talked about that explains in a little bit more detail kind of how Kubernetes works, how it's managed, and how like the control plane and the various worker nodes kind of all fit together. So let's go back. And before I move on to our next blog, I'm just going to check our chat and see what's been going on. Suresh says, Paul, there's a QA at Stack Overflow with gvisor versus Kata Containers. Perhaps that might give you some insights. Sorry, I can't add the link. Suresh, if you want to open up an issue or a pull request to the README, feel free to, and we'll have that there forever for folks watching YouTube for the foreseeable future. Greetings from Norway. Hey, Roy, good to see you. So Anad says, so not a fan of the current iteration of EKS. Way too much involved spinning up a single cluster. I know that they're planning on iterating on it pretty quickly, so I'm excited to see like how EKS grows over like the coming months. And I think that's good feedback. So I can, we can bring it up in open source and share those user experiences with the folks at Amazon who are in upstream and who are contributing to SIG AWS, and maybe see if we can't get those experiences shared. So next we have Leonardo, EKS versus COPS. That would be great. I agree, especially because there's like 90 different ways to run COPS with public and private topologies and all the different subnets. And I don't even know this right now, but I'm curious to see what EKS does, and how is the network configured? How is the VPC configured? Like, I'm kind of curious there. So I think that would make a real good episode. So yeah, looks like folks are agreeing for TGIK plus EKS. And Noah says, I should have worn my Kata hoodie today for solidarity. I didn't know they had Kata hoodies. And can I get a Kata hoodie? Like, can I just like come over this weekend and grab a Kata hoodie? Like, do you just have like a supply of those? Like, how do we get free hoodies? Hoodies are the best. So anyway, back over here, we have the Kubernetes blog that Joe wrote. And this talks about the 4 years of Kubernetes. So you can actually go back and Google like Kubernetes announcement in 2014, and now we're here in 2018. And Joe put together this sweet blog that sort of explains like the almighty first commit to Kubernetes and where it came from. And surprisingly, all the folks that were involved in getting that one commit up and running, and Joe is just the person who did like the copy and paste and actually got the commit in GitHub. But it's actually a ton of work that a lot of other folks from Google had contributed to. And it looks like we have a list of people here. We had Vile, Tim, Brian Grant, Don, Daniel. I'm sure there were more, and there were a lot of ideas that went into it. But this is a pretty cool little introductory of like the first 4 years in Kubernetes and what it's been like. So that's a good read. If you guys want to go check that out. So now I'm flying blind here. So George added these right before I came on. So we're just going to kind of click and see what happens. I know that seems scary, but I trust George. So this first one, we have Google Groups here. Excited to announce full release of 2.0 today. Fleet and Helm charts. Okay, so I don't know what Fleet is. Major features include game server fleets as well as installation via Helm charts. What are fleets? Game server fleets? I don't know. Maybe this is just something that I don't know about. But anyway, congratulations to the folks working on fleets, and happy to see that you're starting to use Helm charts to encapsulate your application there. And really excited, like this is another big one. Helm was recently pushed into the CNCF as a core CNCF project that's no longer under Kubernetes. I know there's a blog on that. I can add it afterwards to the README if folks want to see it. We can add a link and we'll put it in the YouTube as well. But so now it's moving up to one of the CNCF level projects. So if we pull up cncf.io, you can actually see, I think it used to be right here on the homepage. Yeah. Oh, look, and Helm's right here. This is totally great. So yeah, you can see Kubernetes is one of them. Prometheus is another pretty popular one. We all know gRPC is our favorite way to transmit data across a network. And then now Helm recently added as well. So congratulations to the folks at Helm. So going back, let's look at this next one. This is one that I had. So this is installing Kata containers on Ubuntu, and this is where we're going to start today. So I figured we'll start by just running a basic example of a container with Kata. We'll do that on an Ubuntu server up in Amazon, kind of go through the process, explore the runtime, see what the installation feels like, look at how we could run that with Docker, look at how we could run that with Kubernetes, come back, and then we're really going to do a deep dive into what's actually going on and how Kata is basically a lightweight virtualization tool that just plugs in cleanly to the rest of the container ecosystem. And I think this is going to be the best way to kind of explore all this. So let's check up, do a quick checkup on chat, and then we'll jump into an Ubuntu server and get Kata up and running there. So here, I can actually pull this up so we can see what I'm seeing here. Will not be able to authenticate Kubectl to EKS without using Heptio AWS Authenticator. That's a great point. Why we're on the topic of what's been going on in K8s this week. There's a ton of action on Reddit about the Heptio Authenticator and how folks are using it, especially now that EKS was launched. So if anybody has any experience there or has anything they would like to contribute or any feedback at all, feel free to share it with us here at Heptio. We can get it to the right folks. And also feel free to share it in the SIG AWS Slack channel, and we can work out of there as well. So George says, Agni uses the project. It's game servers for Kubernetes. Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize we were running games on Kubernetes now. Now I want to go play all the Kubernetes games. And that's not even the timeline yet. So Omar, hi from Poland. Good to see you. Is there a GitHub repo for Helm version 3? Asked Suresh. Let's take a look and see. Helm version 3 GitHub. Helm v3 at master. These look like they're like markdown files in Kubernetes. Oh, this is ancient. Okay, so this is Kubernetes Helm. This is like back in the days. I don't know if there's a Helm 3 repo yet. I do remember I had asked this question to one of the folks at Microsoft, and they said there is work going on somewhere. So I'm sure it's open source. I'm sure it's just a matter of tracking it down. If anybody knows, feel free to share a link, and if not, we can look it up afterwards or shoot an email off to the folks in SIG Apps and see what they have to say about Helm 3. So Lamati says, hey Chris, you hear when Helm 3.x will be out? I was listening to Software Engineering Daily, and 3.x sounds pretty sweet. No idea. I think it's probably worthwhile if Lamati, I'm going to appoint you. Since you're one of our regulars here, I'm going to pick on you. If you want to kick an email off and just say that we brought it up on TGIK, you can send it to SIG Apps, and I bet we can figure out, if and where there's a repository, release timelines, when we can expect to use it, when it'll be in alpha, and get all that information, and we can put that back in the TGIK repo as well. And with that being said, let's just add an issue right now. We did a What the Helm, I think was the name of the episode, but we should probably do a TGIK on Helm 3 once it comes out as well, so that we can explore and see what's going on. So I'm going to add a quick issue really quick. Let's check out Helm 3 once it's out. I love how we can use GitHub for all this stuff now. It makes it a lot easier to track ideas here in TGIK. Okay, so let's go back and rewind all the way back to our README, and let's pull up our Ubuntu server. Jump into our EC2 console, switch over to my dev user, and we should have, I spun it up beforehand, and I also have a Kubernetes cluster up and running using Kubicorn for TGIK in case we need a cluster. But we should be able to grab this IP address here. And then this is cool because I actually have some really sweet transitions for today. So we're not actually going to be moving things into and off of my screen. I'm actually able to move around on all of my screen real estate here and then wave my hand magically and poof, we're in my terminal. And it's like a cool little fade effect there. And I can jump between my IDE and go back into my terminal or go back into Chrome. It's all pretty cool. And then here on the screen I have all my windows separated so I can look at stuff differently and map that to what you folks at home are seeing along the way. So real quick, let's get chat here in case anybody has any questions. And let's SSH into our Ubuntu server. And then is screen size good? That looks kind of small for me. I can bump it up a little bit, but let's see what you folks say. So I'll give you about 20 seconds or so to say if you would like to see bigger terminal screen size here. Okay, so we can SSH in. Awesome. So we're Ubuntu at our private IP address here, and we're going to go back to Chrome, which I think is Control 4, and we're going to pull up the documentation on getting this up and running in Ubuntu. So Joe says screen size ++. So real quick, before we jump back in, let's get the screen size fixed. So I can come here, bam, bam, and I can zoom in a little bit. Let's do there, and then I can resize there, and let's pull it up a little bit. Bam, that looks good to me. Let's see what you guys have to say about that one. It's a little bit bigger now. And we can resize it again if we need to, because we're running Linux, and OBS allows you to pull everything apart into their own individual frames, which is kind of nice. Okay, cool. So let's go back to Chrome, and let's check out installing Kata containers on Ubuntu. And then along the way, there'll be natural teaching elements where I can kind of say, like, I met with Anne twice this week. We talked about Kata. I was up at the OpenStack Summit. I learned about it some up there. And we'll kind of go through and we'll explain, you know, why it exists and how it's different than like a traditional container runtime. But first, let's just look at getting this up and running in Ubuntu. And I've never done this before, so we're just going to totally go through this together. This step is only required in case Docker is not installed on the system. So let's see what's going on here. Where they wanted to apt-get install, apt transport, HTTPS, CA certificates, wget, and some others. And then, so I think this is just getting Docker up and running. And let's jump in our terminal. I don't think we have Docker. The program Docker is not currently installed. So let's actually run through this and get this installed. And we're running in the cloud, so we can be a little bit why do I keep doing 41? It should be 42 if anything. But we can be a little bit like forgiving about what we're just blindly copying and pasting into our terminal, because this isn't running on any of our local infrastructure here on site. So let's go back and see what's next. We want to curl with TLS download.docker.com, the GPG, and we want a sudo apt-get or apt-key add. So this is just going to add the GPG key for the Synaptic package manager on Ubuntu, so that we can install the rest of the repositories and move forward. So let's copy that. I'm like getting pretty good at the whole switching back and forth thing. Oh, I see what's going on. So whenever I do my hotkeys, okay, that's where the 41 keeps coming from. Whenever I do my transition hotkeys, it's going into my terminal here. Cool. So we can just do that manually. I'll move this out of the way, and I can do that without the hotkeys now. So let's go back to Chrome, and we're going to add our repositories, see what we have here. Deb arch equals arch, download.docker.com/Linux Ubuntu. We're going to get the name of our release, and we're going to pull the stable version, so we can copy that. Come back to our terminal here without using our hotkeys and paste that in. And bam. Go back to Chrome. And now we want to do an apt-get update and then Docker install, or I'm sorry, apt-get install Docker CE. So we'll copy that, and we can do sudo -e apt-get update first. I'll use, sorry, accidentally cut over to the title screen there. But we're back. All I did was try to run an apt-get update, and it looks like we have a malformed etc apt sources.list. So we're going to jump into our text editor of choice that we have already installed on the system, Nano, because I don't know how to use VI. And we're going to see what's going on with our etc apt sources.list.
Did you just switch off the...
Yeah, I'm already back there. So we can pull in Nano here. Joe just came in and checked on me. So let's clear that and etc apt sources.list and see what's going on online. And I think we can do -c here, line 57. So deb arch download.docker.com/Xennial stable. How is this arch equals architecture. I think we can do Ubuntu there. That should do it. Oh, permission denied. Let's sudo hit that again. Scroll down here. So I'm actually a whiz in Nano. Don't tell anybody this, but I can actually fly through this program pretty quick. So I think we do arch equals Ubuntu and see what this looks like. And if not, I might just cheat and do the apt-get install Docker. We'll see how that works. So now we can do a sudo -E apt-get install Docker CE. Apt-get update first. Bam. Wow, that worked the first time. Yep. Oh, George says just remove the arch, and I just added the Ubuntu to it. And now let's see what goes here, see if this will work now. Docker CE has no installation candidate, so let's go with George's recommendation, which is to remove the arch equals down here on line 57. Save that. Now we'll do an apt-get update, and then we can probably do an apt-get install Docker CE. So real quick, while that's installing, yeah, there we go. I'm going to check up on our chat and see what's going on here. So yeah, George says remove the arch. Joe came in. Eric, still working in QEMU TCG mode, right? You have a typo again. I think you have a typo. Ubuntu. Okay. Anyway, we're good. We got Docker installed. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, so there's our Docker command. Here, I'll run it again so to keep it on the screen a little bit longer. So yeah, now that we have Docker installed, let's go back to Chrome here, and let's see what's next. For more information on installing Docker, please go to the Docker guide, and now install the Kata Containers components. So we're gonna shell something out here. Sudo shell, echo deb. Okay, so we're just adding our Kata to the Ubuntu repositories list here. Let's copy that, go back to our terminal, and give that a run. Come back to Chrome. And we're going to curl something, opensuse.org, repositories home, Kata containers, and then we're just going to add the key. Okay, so now we're adding the key for Kata. There we go. Get that out of the way, back to Chrome. Sorry, folks, we just want to get all this stuff up and running, and then we can run a container in Kata. So we're going to do an update again, and then we want to install. So okay, so here's where we should break away. So we have the Kata runtime, the Kata proxy, and the Kata shim. And I think if we go to github.com/Kata containers, we'll go to the documentation first. But we can actually come in and see we've got the runtime here, we've got the shim, and what was the other one? The proxy, Kata proxy. So I bet, yep, here it is here. And so these are all written in Go. And we're going to try to compile them later on, but I think we can just pull down pre-built binaries and run it here on Ubuntu, which will be handy. Let's see what Eric says. Sudo Kata runtime Kata check will tell us the end result hardware support. Yeah, we're going to do a Kata check here after we get the runtime up and running. So real quick, let's go back to our documentation, and let's grab this install command, copy that, go back to our terminal. We'll do our sudo -e apt-get update. Now we have Kata in our repository list, and now we can do our sudo -E apt-get -y install Kata runtime, Kata proxy, and Kata shim. So I got this up and running on my Arch Linux computer already, and I really didn't know what I was getting into when I was like, okay, Kata containers, like how are these things the same and how are they different than Docker containers? And I was like, I want to run some CLI tool. Like I just want to like see what this thing looks like and start to get a feel for it. And the second I ran Kata runtime, I was like, oh, I get it now. It's literally just a replacement for the Docker runtime that the container will run on top of as you start to run a container. What's cool about Kata, though, is it actually uses its own kernel. So in order for us to build this on my Arch Linux system, we're going to have to build a Linux kernel, and then we're going to use this small, lightweight virtualization, which the Kata runtime will run into, and we're actually going to try to plug that into Docker as a runtime. So we're actually running a Docker container on a virtual machine, which is pretty cool. Talking with Anne earlier this week, I was like, so what's the inspiration for this? Like, what's the use case here? Why are folks interested in it? And then she was just like, double layer of isolation. Like you have your kernel layer that normally runs on your host system, but here you're actually doing 2 layers of isolation, both in the container runtime and in the actual kernel itself. So you're really pulling yourself away from the host system, and you're getting this extra layer of virtualization, which really is important to folks, especially if you're running with security-minded concerns along the way. Lamati asks, does the Docker shim process serve the same purpose as the Docker shim? I do not know. I bet Eric here could probably answer that for us, and if not, we'll jump into the repo and see what it looks like. And we can actually check out the code too as well if folks want to just look at the shim code as well. We all know I love poking around at random Go repositories and seeing what's going on. So anyway, without further ado, Kata runtime. There it is. I'm like nervous. Should we run it? Yeah, we're going to run it. So this is the moment where I was like, I get it now. It's very similar to Docker, except for we're actually running with our own unique kernel and not with the host kernel. So the way Docker works is it's just an abstraction layer, and it will still hit the host kernel on this the syscall APIs, and you can build whatever operating system you want to, and run that container on any kernel, or on those kernels rather. We're still working on the FreeBSD kernel. Whereas with Kata containers, you actually get a custom kernel that you would build on your system, and this is going to load that kernel and actually get that up and running. So we should be able to run a Docker image using Kata as our runtime using the Docker CLI tool. So that's why we needed both Docker and the Kata runtime installed on our system so that we can use these tools together. And then after we demonstrate that we have this running, we can look at and talk about what it's going to take to run that in Kubernetes. So folks here, Eric says, yeah, the shim is just there to represent the process running inside the VM, and so that we use Docker instead of stdio and send signals, etc. Docker or a CRI shim would just see this process. Okay, thanks for the clarification there, Eric. So let's jump back in our documentation here. And we might be... Okay, so step 3 here says, configure Docker to use Kata containers by default with the following commands. Ooh, this would be cool. Because if we had this set up, so like I said, I haven't done this before. If Docker's going to be using Kata containers by default, I wonder what the kubelet would do and how the kubelet actually interacts with calling Docker. I wonder if it execs it out or if it actually has its own copy of the Docker components compiled into it. If it just execs it out, this might be a really clever way where we could hack Kubernetes by changing our nodes to actually run the Kata runtime. The kubelet would be blind to that, and then Kubernetes would still work, and we would have an extra layer of virtualization for all of our containers running in Kubernetes if we could just come in and do this on one of our Kubernetes nodes. So curious there, maybe we can check out and see how the kubelet actually interacts with Docker downstream. So I think we can probably skip this for now. I don't think we really need to make this our default runtime, which if you look here, it just says we're going to do docker daemon, add runtime, Kata runtime equals user bin Kata runtime, and then we set our default equals to Kata runtime. I'm going to explicitly call out the runtime flag every time we use it to sort of reiterate the fact that we actually are using a different runtime, but still using familiar Docker commands along the way. So I remember seeing, maybe here in the install guide, let's open up a new tab. There was a Busybox command. We can totally build it from scratch if we want. But it'd be nice if we could find the one that they had in their documentation. So we had, is there a developer guide? Yeah, this is the one we want. So this is what we're going to be looking at later once we try to compile it on Arch Linux. Scrolling all the way down, so this is the whole building your own kernel component, and then you update Docker. And then this is the Docker command we want to check out here. Folks, so is it a new VM for each spawned container? Joe says a very minimal VM, I believe. Yes, Eric, who I believe is one of the Kata experts here on the session with us, says it doesn't end up working in that way. We end up having to use a CRI shim, like the Docker shim, to use Kata. i.e. Cryo and Containerd make the use of an OCI compliant runtime, like Kata and like runc. So real quick, that brings up a really great point, which is what OCI? What is OCI and why is that relevant to this entire conversation here? So we can do the Open Container Initiative here. And the Open Container Initiative defines two things. We have a runtime spec and we have an image spec. And this is sort of like a definition of what it takes to be like a sort of like a conformant container runtime. So this is put together by a lot of folks in the community. Kata is OCI compliant, and this is just going to define what all behavior a program is going to need to satisfy in order to be considered an OCI compliant container runtime. And if this is satisfied, we should be able to kind of pull those runtimes out for various reasons. In this case, to add an extra layer of nested virtualization and use those arbitrarily. And then, of course, we have the more familiar Docker runtime that Docker comes with by default that is also OCI conformant. So this is just the spec that defines that, so that we can, as software engineers, build to this spec and trust other pieces of our system to fall into place accordingly. So really cool. If you didn't know about the OCI runtime spec, it's a really powerful tool, and folks like Cryo and Kata and Docker are really taking advantage of it. Also, in the same sense, we have the Open Container Initiative image spec. And it does the same thing, except for instead of defining what a runtime is, it just defines what a container image is and how we would interact with that, how we would create one, how we would read one, and what we expect to be there if we get one up and running. Looks like we have folks here. Eric says, yes, each pod in Kate's case or each container in Docker's case. So what Eric is saying is that every time we run a new container, we actually have a new instance of our unique kernel that Kata is going to be using to run our container image. Woo, getting deep there. Okay, cool. So without further ado, let's run a container with Kata. So come back here, and we can get rid of our control commands there, and we can paste in, let's grab our example Busybox command. I want to make sure I get it right because there's a few flags there. Documentation. Let's go to our developer guide, and then I can just grab for Busybox. Yeah, there we go. So this is the command we want to run. And we'll talk about what this means in Docker land. So jumping back in our terminal. Let's look at this command before we run it. So as sudo, we're going to run Docker. We're going to do run -ti, which means we're going to start a new TTY. We're going to run it interactively. We're going to pass in the -- runtime flag, and we're going to use the Kata runtime binary, which of course we just learned was OCI compliant. And we're going to run a Busybox container, and we're going to run sh. Busybox is just a really great sample container. We use it for a lot of things, especially in engineering land. That basically will just run as run in Kubernetes, run using Docker, and it doesn't really do anything. So it's almost like a sleep command, and we can define however long we want it to run for, and it's good for stuff like this. So let's see, unknown runtime specified Kata runtime. Is it not in our path? Do we need to maybe define the full path here? Let's see what we got. User bin Kata runtime. I bet we have to configure Docker to even recognize this runtime. Let's go back to our docs and see what's going on here. Update Docker configuration. Nope, wrong documentation here. So let's go back into Ubuntu. Let's try this step 3 and see if we can tell Docker to use it by default, and if this is going to solve our problem of Docker recognizing the runtime. Which another way of doing it is, well, we're going to get into it later, so I'll wait and explain that in a little bit. Okay, so first let's make a new directory, which is going to be etc systemd system docker service.d. Okay, so we're going to make a new unit file for system Cuddle here. Cool. Let's make a new directory. Oh, let's let you guys see that. So yeah, we just made the new directory. Go back. And we're going to cat some information here. So we're going to katacontainers.conf, and then we just define a real basic unit file here. So let's grab this. Yeah, Eric, system Cuddle. I'm happy that you also appreciate the system Cuddle. Cool. So let's cat this. Bam, go back to our docs. And now we can restart the Docker daemon. So we're going to do a system cuddle daemon reload, and then we'll do a system cuddle restart Docker. And I have my big mechanical keyboard. I don't know if you guys have noticed that yet, but I'm banging away on my mechanical keyboard with my sweet Heptio and Kubernetes control and meta keys. Anyway, I bet we can now run. Let's find our command in our bash history here. Runtime, Kata runtime. I bet Docker should now recognize this. Let's see what happens. Oh, good. Unable to find Busybox locally. It's going to pull it. Error response from daemon. Okay, so we have OCI runtime create failed. QEMU Lite is not installed on the system. Okay, and I think we're going to hit this when we look at running it in Arch later. This was what I was trying to compile right before the episode that I tweeted about. And I think, if I remember, as I was Googling around for this, we can just apt-get install QEMU Lite. So let's see what we have here. Sudo apt-get install QEMU Lite. QEMU Lite set to manually installed. It's already the newest version. Interesting. Let's see this memory, or not this memory, this error one more time. Docker, error response from daemon, OCI runtime, create failed. QEMU Lite system x64, 2 gigs of memory, slots 2, invalid value of -m option, max memory size. Okay, so now I think what we should do is we should do that Kata check that Eric suggested earlier and see if we get any valuable information out of there. And so now what's going on is we're starting to sort of explore all of this virtualization that's happening behind the scenes that basically we're trying to interact with via Docker. So Docker's trying to create this container as it would using any OCI compliant container runtime. And now we're actually getting Kata up and running. We're starting to go through the process of running this container on top of our new custom kernel. And that's where QEMU Lite comes into play. So let's do Kata runtime. Kata dash runtime. I think it's Kata check. Okay, cool. So yeah, again, this is written in Go, so we see some familiar logs here. We have our CPU property found. We have an error, CPU property not found. Description -v, virtualization support. Name equals VMX, PID equals 143, source, runtime type flag. And Lucas asked a question about networking in Kata, which, Eric, I'm going to let you get to that first, and if not, we can talk about the different container, like this container networking interface and CNI, and I'm curious if Kata uses that as well. So it looks like we have another error here, OpenSys module, KVM parameters nested, no such file or directory, name Kata runtime, source equals runtime. Interesting stuff here. Was not expecting to hit errors along the way. Let's see if we can get any clues from our studio audience, and if not, I'm going to totally just start hacking away here. Steven says, yeah, this is what I was talking about before. Yep, it takes the v-eth inside the network. Okay, so yeah, Eric is saying it does. This is going back to the networking question. I know I'm jumping around a lot. Eric is saying, yeah, it does take the v-eth, or eth, short for Ethernet, inside the network namespace and attaches QEMU via MAC-v-tap. AWS does not support nested KVM virtualization today, and that's what it's looking for. Okay, so I see what's going on here. So we're trying to run Kata in a virtualized Ubuntu, and this is where the kernel stuff really starts to get interesting when we're running so many different layers of virtualization here. Steven is saying that it does not look like we're going to be able to run a virtualized kernel in an already virtualized Amazon instance. So there's no nested virtualization support. Okay, so this is why I wanted to bring my computer in, and I'm kind of bummed that I wasn't able to get it up and running beforehand with Arch Linux, but we can just totally move over to Arch and start hacking away if we want to. And I guess this brings up a good question, and Eric, I'm going to pick on you a little bit here. Since since Amazon does not support nested virtualization, is Kata and the Kata containers, is that going to be a viable option for folks who want to run, say, Kubernetes up in AWS or GKE? And Steven says, not sure about Azure, but you can run nested in GCP. Okay, so that kind of answers our question a little bit. So we can maybe try to get a GCP instance up and running and fly through this stuff really quick concurrently. Cloud.google.com. Eric says they have some bare metal offerings as far as I know, and Azure does as well. Okay, so it looks like the one cloud I picked is the one that was going to give Kata a little bit of a hard time here. And I think I can log in if I go to my console. Hopefully we can get a new Ubuntu image up pretty quickly. I don't have a Heptio GCP account. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I totally have Azure. Portal.azure.com. Sign into Microsoft Azure. And I'll go quick through the install again so we don't have to jump through it and just see if we can't get a container running. Stay signed in, yes. Cool, so I know we want to go here on the left. Let's go to virtual machines. Where are those at? Virtual networks, virtual machines. And let's create a new virtual machine. So let's do Ubuntu server. Eric says D2 instances, and John says, Joe says, I had to run on Azure when I was doing Docker for Windows as it needed to create a Linux VM under the covers. And then John says, before you do GCP, you need to use an image that supports nested. Okay, so we're going to try to fire up an Ubuntu virtual machine in Azure and then SSH into that and see if we can't get the container runtime and get Busybox up and running there. Also, the fact that we have 16 cores and a couple of hard drives sitting next to me in this room under all the lights for the first time. Like, it's starting to get really warm in here, which is pretty funny. So I'm like basically working in an unair-conditioned server room right now. Let's see what folks are saying. I like this. I can just read what people are saying. You need to use some gcloud magic to enable VMX, for instance. Oh, okay, so it looks like Steven is warning us away from using gcloud. Eric says Azure is easy. Wow, Azure's totally dominating this one. This is the first time for me. I'm kind of excited right now. Eric says S4 underbar V3, for example, works. So I think that's the size of the virtual machine that we're suggesting to run on. Sen says, is Kata Containers supports AMD also? I mean, all major CPUs and ARCs. Yeah, that's a great question. Does Kata only run on Intel chips, or does it run across the board on AMD as well? So anyway, let's go back to getting our Ubuntu server up and running in Azure. So we can come here, we can do Ubuntu server. You guys are going to watch me stumble my way through the Azure portal here. So I think here on the right we pick, let's do 1604 because it's LTS. And then I think we come down here and we do create. And then let's give it a name. We'll call it TGI Kata. We'll give it an SSD, username Nova. We need a public key, so let's jump back in my terminal. Exit. And we can cat SSH. I want to make sure I don't cat my... Actually, you know what? I'm going to do this in a different screen just because I don't even want to risk it. I want to make sure I'm not going to cat my private key accidentally out to YouTube here. So idrsa.pub, and let's grab this and copy this. Okay, cool. Copy, and we'll get that out of our way. So now let's go back to Azure, and we can paste in our public key. Bam. So we're going to use our Azure subscription. We're going to create a new resource group. We're going to call it, we'll call it the same as our virtual machine, TGIK Kata, and we'll create it in East US. And we have an OK button, so that looks good. So Joe says gcecloud.google.com/compute/docs. So I think that what Joe is linking there is for folks at home who want to run in GCE, how to enable nested virtualization so you could run Kata on one of your images there. Okay, great. So now let's take our clue from our friend Eric, who said DS4v3 is what we want to look for here. So we want DS4. So DS12, DS4. See DS4. Let's see if we can search here. So DS4 underbar. We have V2. We have standard and promo. I don't know what any of this stuff means. I don't think we have a V3, but I bet a V2 is probably going to be a good place to start. So let's just do standard. That seems more standard to me. Let's see what folks in chat are saying. Eric just says any of the DS2 is close enough. Okay, cool. So let's do select, create this one. Let's do availability zone. I don't know what's going on here. Availability set. What's an availability set? We'll do none. I hope that works. 30 gigs looks good. Virtual network, we have a subnet. Public inbound ports, we definitely want SSH. These ports will be exposed to the internet. Good, that's what we want. Looks like some other configuration. No, I don't want any of that stuff. Okay, good. Offer details, I have to like sign my life away and then hit create. Okay, cool. So that's gonna get up and running. Lucas says, give Kris some thumbs up, people, for fighting with Azure or for trying to get Kata up and running in the cloud. Okay, so while we wait for this to come up, let's jump back into our Kata documentation. And thanks, Tom, for the thumbs up. Jump back into our Kata documentation and learn a little bit more about running in Ubuntu and the requirements for the custom kernel that we would be building if we tried to run this thing locally. So let's go back to our Ubuntu. Do I have that pulled up? Let's see, where was this at? Installing Kata containers on Ubuntu. So I bet we can skip. I'll go through the stuff pretty quick when it comes time to rerun it. And then, yeah, of course, the last thing down here is docker run -ti Busybox. Well, we're going to start a not boarding in shell, and we don't have to specify the -- runtime command. So that's pretty straightforward for running on Ubuntu. Let's see what's going on in Azure here. Waiting for virtual machines. So real quick, while we're waiting for this to spin up, do folks have any questions so far about Kata containers in general, what the use cases is, or how the broader scope of things fit together, and how Kata fits into Docker, and how Kata could potentially fit into Kubernetes moving forward? Happy to answer those as well. And somebody asked about the shim code earlier, so let's jump in and take a look at the shim code. Anad says, what I've always loved about Kris in these sessions that I learned from things that go wrong versus things that go right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, Joe and I talk about this a lot. One of the big, values that we really like in TGIK is, things go wrong. We're doing some live debugging, and we get to explore and show people the way we think and how we would, debug the stuff on the fly. And really, like, watching other folks do this in my career is, like, that's how I learned Linux. That's how I learned Kubernetes. That's how I learned, like, all of these broader concepts, was actually seeing what people do when something goes wrong, and learning where people start poking around. So anyway, let's take a look at our shim code here and even see what this thing does. This project implements the shim for the Kata project. The goal of this component is to handle standard I/O and signals of the container process. Okay, so this just looks like it's just forwarding system signals off to the container process after it starts running, which of course would be running with a nested virtual kernel, so that we would need to port those into whatever kernel we were running, which the Kata kernel, according to Anne, is a flavor of the Linux kernel. And I think we think it's a fork. Let's see if we can't find the source code here for this. Tom says, yeah, the whole reason why I watch it, the whole troubleshooting stuff is the best. Thanks, Tom. Eric says, it's clear container adding support for ARM, PowerC, PC, and Kata containers. And this says, apart from the kernel level isolation which Kata brings, can you elaborate more on what security advantage Kata brings compared to Docker? Eric, if you want to answer a NIST question there, if not, I can jump into some thoughts that I would have and why I would think that Kata containers would be a little bit more secure, other than the double layer of isolation and pulling the container process itself away from the host kernel. For instance, like if you're looking at C groups and that's your only layer of isolation, you're now getting that plus a kernel when you run Kata containers. So just if you are worried about getting, if there's an attack vector in your system, this is just going to put one more thing that's very complex in the way of a potential attacker and your whatever process you're running your business logic in. Okay. So let's see what's going on in Azure. Okay, so I think, it's been so long since I've done this. Let's go to virtual machines, where'd they go? And I think I can click on this one. And I think I get this public IP address. And let's go to my terminal. And SSH, I think it's Nova at, and then I paste our IP address. Yes. Clear that. And let's really quick install. I'm not going to go back and forth in the documentation. We're just going to go through this since we've already gone through it once. let's get this up and running on Ubuntu. So the first thing we want to do here is get Docker up and running. So we're going to install our Docker dependencies. We're going to add our GPG key. We're going to add our Docker CE repository. Let me copy this command and I'll paste it over. Bear with me 1 second. Bam. And then we're going to do an update, and then we want to do a an apt-get install. I don't know why I keep saying Docker install. An apt-get install Docker CE. So sudo -E apt-get update. Again. So that's our first bug. Whatever we're copying and pasting there, for some reason it's putting this erroneous line in our apt sources.list file. So etc apt sources list. Scroll down. No, I don't want to save that. What did I do? Okay. So delete. Save that. Oh my god, permission denied again. How many times can I edit our abt sources.list file? So now we can run our apt-get update. Anand Sharma says, I'm sure why the username equals Nova here. That's just my last name and what a lot of my friends call me. And then I feel like the word Nova is usually easy to find whenever I do things in the cloud. So it's like a handy string to grep for because you don't ever see it. So that's why I usually like to name things some form of Nova or Knova or something like that. Anyway, we have our update is done. Let's do sudo apt-get install Docker CE, and then I think we need to do capital E, which for folks at home who don't know, the capital E is just passing whatever environmental variables we have defined in our current shell up to the sudo process that we're creating when we run this command. So just environmental variables will pass through is what you need to realize here. Okay, so now we're installing Docker. Yes, we want to continue. So we have someone, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, Abdenor. A new case was submitted to the AWS Premium support about enabling nested virtualization for EC2 instances. Oh, that's awesome. If we could get a link to either I don't know if cases are public in Amazon, but if they are public, if we could grab a link so that folks at home can follow along, or if we could check back maybe in a couple TGIK episodes and see what's going on and give an update there. But that's really cool that we're starting to push for that. I think perfect demonstration here is like, oh, I just need an Ubuntu server. I'm going to spin one up in Amazon, not really knowing what I'm getting into. I made the mistake of trying to run Kata in EC2, so I'm imagining that I'm not the first person to go and try to do this. So it's probably important that we, let the folks at Amazon know, like, hey, we're trying to do this, and this is important to us in the container community here. Anyway, Anand says, sorry, duh, my bad. I thought it had something to do with virtual images settings, kind of like it is for the Ubuntu AMI. Nope, Anand, when I was creating my virtual machine in Azure, it asked for either a name or a username. And just from working at Microsoft, I remember that it doesn't default to Ubuntu like it does in Amazon. It defaults to whatever you name your virtual machine or your user or whatever it was. And that's how you SSH in. Anyway, Docker's installed. Let's install Kata. Okay, so again, we're going to mutate our repository list here. Then we're going to come in and we're going to add our GPG key. Then we're going to do another update. I guess I could have done both of these updates at the same time, but whatever. So then we're going to do an update again. And last but not least, we're going to install Kata Runtime, Kata Proxy, and the Kata Shim, which we now know the Kata Runtime is a CLI tool that is actually going to try to pass the container process off to our new kernel. The Kata Shim is just going to handle the proxying of all of those operating system signals so that we can interact with it. And I think we still are waiting for Eric here to kind of mention what Kata Proxy does. Okay, folks in chat, sure, once I got the answer, I will give an update. Okay, so yeah, looks like, again, I'm really sorry here, Abdenor is going to try to keep us updated on what's going on with nested virtualization in Amazon moving forward. And it looks like we're waiting for the Kata Runtime to install. So that wasn't too bad. I was probably only 5 minutes, and we switched over to Azure, and we're going to be able to run the Kata Runtime and get a container up and running. And I'm going to take this opportunity to grab some delicious LA Crocs while we wait for it. Oh, good. In that time, Eric answered about the proxy. Oh, for the proxy, you can have 10 containers in a pod. Today we use virtio/serial in and out to the VM. One pipe, many streams, so the proxy multiplexes and demultiplexes. If anybody wants an elaboration on that, yeah, LA Crocs is what I call it. If anybody wants an elaboration on that, we can probably go into a little bit more into the proxy and actually talking about what it means to multiplex something and demultiplex something, but that might be a little bit advanced for folks at home. So, looks like we have Kata Runtime up and running. So, without further ado, let's configure. This is like back where we left off. Like, hey, fast forward for folks at home. Here we are back where we left off a few minutes ago. We're going to configure Docker to use this by default. So we're going to make our directory again. Not 41. Sudo make dir. And then since I've already kind of shown this, I'm just not going to skip back and forth because it'll make things go a little bit faster. And then we're going to cat this unit file into etc systemd system. Just like that. And then, did we get our EOF in there? No, we did not. Oh yeah, we did. Okay, cool. I was making sure we got our EOF at the end of the file, otherwise system Cuddle's gonna yell at us. So last but not least, we want to do a daemon reload and then restart Docker. So system Cuddle daemon reload and sudo system Cuddle restart Docker. And then, so real quick, can I just take a minute while I'm on the air and people are watching? The fact that init and systemd have different verb parlance, like before you used to do Docker restart and now you do restart Docker, does that really just drive anybody else nuts? Because I'm constantly doing them the wrong ways, and then when I think I'm doing them the right way, I'm actually using the other tool, and it just gets really confusing. Anyway, system Cuddle restart Docker. Okay, so the Docker daemon's reloaded, the Docker daemon's restarted. Now let's try to run Busybox. So let's grab our Busybox Docker run command here. So Docker run -ti, new tty, interactive shell, Busybox, starting a shell, deep breath. Pointer image. KVM kernel module. Oh man, so close. Error response from daemon OCI runtime create failed. Couldn't access KVM kernel module. No such file or directory. Oh, and chat just started exploding, so let's see what folks are saying in chat really quick. Okay. Let's scroll up. Okay. Eric says, can we sudo kata runtime kata check one more time too? Yes, Eric, I'll do that in a second, but let me just load what everybody else has said in chat into my personal memory so that I know where we are and what's going on in chat and keep up with other folks' thought patterns along the way. So Tim Carr says, yes, I'm the worst. Gift says, yes. It's a bit like my experience with IN. John says, at Eric, Ernst, I super didn't appreciate how much your YAML is doing in terms of system setup when I tried to get this running in Kates. That looks like a little bit of outside of what we're working on right now. You can use both Virtue.io SCSI is the default. Tom says, yes. Whichever way I want to try first is wrong. And John is giving me some commands here, I think, to help us debug our problem. So first things first, let's run that Kata check. I think that's going to be an important part of figuring out how we're going to get Kata running up here in Azure and Ubuntu. So we want to do Kata runtime, Kata check. Okay, so let's see what we have here. We have this error, CPU property not found. I think this is what we saw before when we were running in Amazon. I wonder if I needed to enable nested virtualization in Azure in order to get this thing running. And then we also have this other error down here, sysmodule KVM Intel parameters nested, no such file or directory. So I think what we're doing here is we're just doing a quick check to see what the system looks like, to see if we can even shell out one of these container processes, or I shouldn't say shell out, but run one of these container processes using the Kata runtime, using our new kernel. And I'm going to take John's advice here and see if we can't cat the CPU info and grep for VMX here. So we want to cat everybody's favorite directory /proc, CPU info, and then we're going to grep. I'll do grep -i for good measure. VMX here. Bam, bam, bam. Nothing. Okay, Eric says, it should be by default. I didn't see the exact machine you grabbed. Nope, totally cool. So we can go and we can check out the Azure console here. Bam and bam, and look for, we'll just start with the word virtual and see what we can find. So virtual machine, virtual network subnet. Sin says yes. When people say yes, it's hard to tell which question you are answering. Yeah, that's a great point. And you look at this a lot, but when I'm doing a TGIK or when Joe's doing a TGIK, we're usually about 20 seconds, maybe 10 seconds ahead of you folks. So a lot of the times we'll ask a question and we'll get some context back, and there's like that little bit of lag there, and it's like, not really sure what they're referring to. Yep, so anyway, John, you hit the nail on the head here. He says, yeah, no VMX, no Kata. Okay, so I think we're learning the importance of nested virtualization with Kata, and how that's going to work. But I think the big takeaway here for folks who have never looked at Kata containers before is going to be understanding how that's going to interface with the rest of our system, which whether our system is just running a simple Docker container or if it's going to actually be running one of these in Kubernetes. Understanding that, yes, we need nested virtualization. Yes, there's going to be a custom kernel image somewhere on the file system, which we can look at the documentation for that as we kind of close out the episode here. And yes, we actually want the Docker CLI tool and the Docker daemon up and running so that we can actually create one of these container processes and send it out to the Kata runtime underneath. So there's a lot of layers going on. Because I'm running on Linux, I don't have my handy-dandy document cam because I'm actually using that one for my face right now. Otherwise, I would draw a picture of all the different layers, so maybe I can scribble something together and push it up to the repository moving forward. So without further ado, I think it's important, let's look at the actual kernel that the Kata runtime would be shelling out to, and we can do that on my local Arch Linux computer and just start to explore that and see what's going on and how that compares and contrasts to the Linux kernel. And then along the way, if folks have any other ideas for getting a container up and running with Kata somewhere in the cloud, let me know, and we can try to jump through that really quick. Yeah, and I think that'll probably be about time. We're already an hour into the episode, an hour 7 minutes. So by the time we actually look at the kernel here, we're probably going to be scooting it pretty close to the end here. Yeah, we had Abdinor say in GCE, enabling VMX is done by the attribute license. And I think that's the link Joe pointed to earlier. So let's just maybe take a look and see. Let me scroll up in chat. If we need to get this up and running. Bam. Enable nested virtualizations for VM instances. So this document describes how to enable support for nested virtualization on GCE instances. And then it talks about how it works, restrictions, and the different KVM versions. Okay, so this is totally what we want to do. We can, I don't know, what do folks think? Should we try to get the Kata container runtime up and running in this, or should we go and explore the source code for the Kata kernel and look at what it would take to build that and eventually shell out to that on a local system that we know nested virtualization won't be a problem on? So I'll give folks a few seconds to kind of say what they think, and we can steer the episode that way. Let me grab some Diet Coke real quick. And this is one of my favorite parts about TGIK is that it totally is an interactive thing, and folks at home can come and contribute and participate, and we really don't ever really know how one of these episodes is going to turn out, which makes it exciting. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything in chat yet, so I'm going to jump back in my terminal, exit out of our Azure virtual machine, and look at what's going on here on my local Arch Linux machine. We have the Kata runtime here in runtime. And let's pull up our documentation. And we want to find our developer guide. Oh, and Simon says, looks like you need V3 or D or E servers on Azure. Okay, so I think what Simon is saying is the V2 that we actually picked to get up and running that we thought was going to work does not have the nested virtualization we needed. So we could, recreate a new server and get it up and running. But I think at this point, folks, if you've run a Busybox container, you can imagine the user experience for actually getting that up and running with Kata. It's unfortunate we're not going to be able to poke at the underlying operating system and seeing what they're doing, but we can totally go and explore the kernel anyway and see what's going on. I don't think it makes sense to spin up another virtual machine at this point. So anyway, let's look at the developer guide and see what this would look like developing on our local system here. Oh, yeah?
Hey, so Anne says that Eric has a VM. Hey, everybody. Has a VM that's all set up, ready to go. If you want to, Slack me or send me or do something, your public key, I think we can figure that out.
Oh, cool.
She reached out on Twitter. We're, using all the chats.
Oh, yeah, no, I, turn all that stuff off on
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right, so if you can figure out some way to get it to me or her, then we should be good.
Cool. Okay, so what just happened here, Joe says that Anne has been messaging people offline. I'm completely blind in here. If it's not on chat, I have no idea what folks are doing. I mute everything. That Eric's got a virtual machine we can use. So let's see if we can't send Joe my public key, and Joe's going to send me back an IP address, I'm assuming, where we can actually go and get the Kata runtime up and running. So 1 second here. So let's go, and I'll grab my public key again. Here it is. Copy this. Folks at home, you're going to get to see my Twitter. And I'm going to pull that off to the side real quick so you don't get to see all of mine and Joe's top secret Twitter DMs here. All right, Joe, I'm going to message you on Twitter, my public key. Okay, this makes it super handy since we already have a virtual machine up and running. So public key there. And then a big shout out for Anne and Eric for helping us out here. Tom, awesome, best episode ever. Yeah, it's kind of cool because Joe's actually right there. So it's like watching at home, it feels like you're isolated in here, but it's nice to know there's folks outside the room. So let's see. That's going to go over to Joe. Looks like I'm sure he's going to send that off to Anne, which for folks at home who don't know, Anne works at the OpenStack Foundation, good friend of mine here in Seattle, and Eric is on the call as well, or not on the call, but on the TGIK as well, who's been helping us out. And they're going to get us a virtual machine for us to get Kata, the runtime, up and running. Cool. So in the meantime, let's clean. I'm going to go ahead and shut down this server since we're good here. Eric says it'll be 5 minutes. Okay, so we'll probably, that's going to be cutting it pretty close on time. I'm wondering, and we did this the other day with Cubicorn, where after the fact, we just did a quick little demo, and we kind of plugged it into the episode afterwards that said, here's what the user experience would be. I would really like a chance to, actually look at the kernel that it's running and see how the container process is interacting with it, and I'm sure folks at home are curious as well. And if it's going to be 5 minutes, I think that is enough, and we can splice in an example after the fact here. Unless folks have any other questions, I think we can call this one an episode. Yeah, and like George said, big hats off to everybody for helping us out. I just don't want to sit here and wait too much longer for a virtual machine just to get the nested virtualization up and running. So I guess real quick, we can do a quick summary, recap everything we've learned today for folks at home and how it's all going to fit together, and then we can come in and we can splice in a quick demo of running Busybox or an arbitrary container with the Kata runtime with Docker. So we learned that Kata has its own kernel that needs to be on the host system that it's running, that it's going to send the container process to. Let's go back to my terminal here. We have learned that you can use a tool like Docker to create a new container process and shell out to a container runtime. We know that you can configure arbitrary container runtimes in Kubernetes, and we want to find out how the kubelet actually interacts with creating a container, and if it's going to start its container runtime from the kubelet, or if we're actually going to shell out to Docker to see if we can't actually spoof that and get Kata containers running in Kubernetes. Anath says, did the nested virtualization affect the performance? And Eric says, it affects it a bit depending on what you're doing, and it isn't too bad. Okay, so anyway, we'll give Eric a few minutes. We're going to say goodbyes really quick, and then we can do a splice in with an example after the fact here. So thanks for joining, everybody. It's been great to see everyone, and we're going to see everybody next week. I think Joe mentioned he's going to be back on, so no idea what Joe's going to work on, but we'll see everybody next week. Thanks, bye.